Thanks for coming this afternoon for this GermaniumWeb training session. Okay, my name is Ian Loh, okay, and I'm the Technical Product Manager for this product. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to start with the question why, and specifically why GermaniumWeb? Why does GermaniumWeb exist, and why do we spend our time developing it? So we at German, okay, at the time we already were specializing in interior visualization. We had already developed quite a number of projects for the government agencies like the National Library, the Singapore Civil Defence Force, URA. Okay, so they actually liked these applications and they allowed them to do things like study buildings and do their planning. Okay, however, these were just applications. You can take the application, use it, create data, but you cannot change how the application behaves because it's a compiled binary. Okay. So our partners started asking us whether they could use our technology in their products. So for example, like in a security system product or in a kiosk product, they actually want to use our in-building technology. So then we decided to move our technology to a web component, and GermaniumWeb was born. So GermaniumWeb is an interior mapping engine. Okay? So you can write applications like this one, which is a building directory, a visitor guide to Fusionopolis. Okay, so just to show one example, this case is showing you how to get from the main foyer of the building to the What's Next studio. Okay, so it shows you the path, and the next step is supposed to walk past this symbiosis banner. Okay, so you can immediately see that there's lots of advantages to doing things in interior 3D because you can see landmarks like this and you can find them when you're in the actual building. Okay. Moving further on, so it goes up the lifts, as you go up to level 11. Yeah, and on over into the destination, which is the What's Next studio, right? And once we're there, we can also have a quick, like first-person look around the place. Okay, so this is just one simple example of what you can build with GermaniumWeb. Okay, so GermaniumWeb is an interior mapping engine. Okay? Now here I'd like to clarify a bit. Many people, when they first see it, right, they think that it is a generic 3D engine like WebGL or Google O3D or Unity 3D or even 3D in Flash. Okay? Here to clarify that GermaniumWeb is not a 3D engine, it is an interior mapping engine which is one level above that. So instead of working with things like triangles, textures, shaders, rendering algorithms and stuff like that, okay, you work with higher level objects like buildings, blocks, levels, place marks. So you're dealing with high level objects, not low level triangles. Okay, so that's why we have GermaniumWeb. Okay, so what makes up GermaniumWeb? So I hope all of you guys already know that GermaniumWeb is actually a browser plugin, okay, available for IE and Firefox now. We are working on a Chrome version, but it probably won't be out in time for Code Extreme, so stick to these two. And currently only available for the Windows platform, but all the versions from XP to Windows 7. Okay, besides the plugin, there's also the JavaScript API, the application programming interface. So this allows you to write your program in JavaScript, in a very simplified JavaScript. You can see it's pretty much almost like English. And the focus of today's training session is to teach you guys the basics of this JavaScript API. Okay, so now we know the two parts. Okay, how do they come together in your application? Okay, so take a quick case. Say you guys, as web developers, want to develop something like Convenio.com. So the first step is to target the JavaScript API, which is basically asking the API server to insert the API into your web page. Okay. After you do this, you can then write your application against this language. Okay. And when a visitor comes to your website for the first time, let's say it's IE user, the API will automatically detect that he doesn't have GermaniumWeb installed, and tell him, okay, this website needs GermaniumWeb to run. Okay. Ask him whether he wants to download it. Okay. So this is an automatic download, and similar to installing Flash or Java, you just install it one time and you can use it on all the GermaniumWeb powered websites. Okay. So once there's a plugin initialized, the API will then translate the program to the form that the plugin understands. Okay. And if the user is instead using Firefox, okay, the API also translates the same program into the Firefox specific form. Okay? So the important thing to note here is that your program up here doesn't change. Okay? You just write it once and it will behave the same on both IE and Firefox. Okay? Okay, specifically the Germanium will behave the same. The rest of your web page, you still got to make them appear the same on both browsers, using CSS and stuff, especially if you're targeting IE6. Okay, this is the pictorial version of what's happening. So I'll just quickly show what this diagram looks like in HTML code. Just a very quick one. So let's take a look at the basic anatomy of a super simple Germanium app. Okay, so the first step, as you saw, okay, we request for the API. Okay, we specify the version that we want, and we pass in the API key. Okay, so this API key you can get for free by applying on our website. Okay, so this allows us to track who is using the API. Okay. Yes, one thing I'd like to mention, so for the competition day, if you use Germanium, we are actually going to be deploying on-site API server. Okay, so the URL will be different. Okay, this is to make sure that even if your internet access goes down on that day, right, your Germanium app will still work. Okay, and secondly, that on-site API server will not check for API keys. Okay, so you don't need to worry about licensing for the competition itself. So next step is we want to give Germanium a place to go to in the web page. So in this case, it's just a simple div taking up the whole page, or 100% of it. And when the HTML page initializes, when the body loads, we actually call an initialization function. In an initialization function, we call the first JavaScript API function. We ask Germanium to embed the browser plugin into this div. Okay, so it will take over this whole div. Okay, and when it's done initializing, to call our onInitOK function. Okay, so in the onInitOK function, Germanium passes the web control object, and this web control object is the master object. You call all the other functions through the web control, like loading buildings, adding place marks, retrieving data in the scene, okay, all through this web control object. So of course we want to have to remember it, so we just store it in a germ variable here. Yeah, we like germs. Okay, so that is already enough to be classified as a Germanium app. But if you do that, you just end up with an empty scene. Okay, so take one more step and ask Germanium to load a building. And this is one of the free buildings that we're providing on our site for you to practice writing your code on. This office building. Okay, so let's take a look at what it looks like. You can follow me on your browser also by going to this page, the CXA 2010 links. Okay, so all the links that we're using today are on this page. So the functional police example was this one. Okay, now we're looking at the basic anatomy. So let's take a look at the source code first. Okay, so it's pretty much what I went through just now, just with a bit of extra HTML. Okay, the rest, yeah, the initialization function is here. We ask it to load the building, and it's going into the div, which is full 100%. Okay, so what happens when this HTML was loaded is Germanium gets loaded in the page, takes over the whole page, and immediately the user can already see the building, can manipulate it, can go around in 3D. Okay, okay, at this point also, I'll just give a brief run through on the UI of Germanium. Okay, there's the buttons, which are pretty straightforward. They do what is shown on the icon. Okay, if you're directly manipulating the scene, if you left click and drag, then you're moving horizontally. If you middle click and drag, you are rotating, you're orbiting around the scene. Okay, if you're using a trackpad and you don't have a middle mouse button, you press the left and right buttons together, and then you will get this. Okay, and lastly, for the right click and drag, is zooming in and out. Okay, if you use Google Earth, I believe that their interface is identical to this. Okay, so this is the simplest, one of the simplest possible Germanium apps that we can possibly have. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the introduction. Okay, so I hope you understand, you have the picture of where Germanium is and why you would want to use it. So now moving on into the training session proper. Okay, so